Hey everybody, it's your buddy Beard Grizzly, and you'll
come with me if you want to live.
Don't worry, I'll try to avoid making too many time travel jokes as soon as I find a time machine and stop myself from making this terrible mistake. First off, I know this is a theory that's been going around by several in the community right now. I know this isn't entirely original of me, and I know it's not completely something that I can take total credit for. I don't have names or know where the original concept came from, as I don't visit Reddit, aka Saltwall, just for my own sanity's sake. That said, I did just want to acknowledge that from either those in my community or outside of it. I know it's been told to me a couple times already, but I just kind of built upon it with information that I found. Anyway, Saint-14 finally popped back up, or he was hovering there the whole time. In either case, we finally get to see him, or simulated him, or actual him, so we see the possibly simulated supposed fate of Saint-14 here, hovering over a bunch of X. There, that covers it. What I would say now is to not necessarily lose hope that this is the end of his story, but instead would say to keep an open mind about some of the points that Saint-14 has over the last few years of lore. After really looking over the points presented in several items, along with some older grimoire, I'm left to believe that Saint-14 is a time traveler. And before you say, oh Beard, that's just silly, let's start with an obvious point. Saint-14's helmet. He walked out into the demon light, but at the end, he was brighter. Pay on to Saint-14. Audio unavailable. Maintenance frame transcript follows. It is still argued who's talking here. I think it checks in Cade 6, but we may not even know who SX is. Moving on. You know what they say about Titans. They're loud and abrasive? The good ones are all dead. You don't know that Saint is dead. The greatest Titan who ever lived just disappeared. Call it a hunch. A generator roars. No one ever put down a kill faster than he could. But man, he was a weirdo. Eccentricity was his strength. Talking about the speaker like you're related to him is eccentric. Claiming he's seen the future, that he fought 6 fronts fueled on the idea that some guardian savior is coming? That's insane. Belief is a hell of a thing. Sure, yeah, one guardian's going to fix everything. Kick Crud off the moon. Make it look like us Vanguard know our head from our hindquarters. Hey, where are you going? One of the new recruits from old Russia I've had my eye on, entering the Crucible for the first time. Hey, maybe they're the one. We'll call him Crota's End. The point that really matters here is from Cade, claiming he's seen the future, that he fought 6 fronts fueled on the idea that some guardian savior is coming. Apparently, Saint-14 has the prophetic eye of a warlock, being able to look into the future to some degree. He apparently shares his beliefs with those around him, perhaps just to send some sense of hope throughout the tower, or, he's actually seen the future. Let's keep going along this line and refer back to the Darkness card from year 1. Yeah, all the way back. Bungie or George Lucas is showing. Saint-14's position argues that the Darkness was an invading armada, an alien force of incredible but tangible power. Some adherents believe that this armada sprang from species rejected or discarded by the Traveler for their sins. Well, this also leads back to something we've already seen, even if I have arguments therein that these ships aren't the Darkness per se, but are just highly linked to them. Saint-14's position even argues that the power they have is incredible, but tangible. This means the Darkness isn't a force similar to light, as we might have speculated this whole time. Still, he knew about these ships already somehow. Perhaps, anyway. It could have been a very educated guess that things need to travel through space in a ship for the most part. I mean, until you talk about the Ahamkara, in which case, more arguments therein. Okay, so what if Saint-14 is just a hopeful, educated guesser? So what if the guy has seen some stuff and might be messed up in the head, or might have some brain scrambling done? I mean, really, that might not be the only helmet he's slammed a Kel's head in with. Not that we have any proof for that. Anyway, let's start talking time travel, because as much as it might not be a thing for the Vex, it's seemingly a thing for a certain Exo Stranger we know of from the olden days of Destiny. The idea that she could time travel is widely debated, but just about confirmed in 2 different cards. The first is from one of her own namesake, Ghost Fragment Exo Stranger. In this card, we see that she's always within the same spot whenever she seems to time jump, getting a feel for how a certain timeline turns out, seeing which force may win, how certain events go down. She's witnessing the collapse, speaking on how the names of the dead shift from timeline to timeline. She's done this so often that she knows the exact blades of grass that she bends every time she makes this time jump. This is only point 1 of how you can interpret her time jumps, with the second being from Fragment Exo Stranger 2. Boy, this is about the only linear move I think I'm making this entire video, 1 to 2. Anyway, within this card, we start to hear of her time jumps. We also see an all too familiar pattern of writing that starts to spring up, which is very similar to that of both Maya Sundaresh and Future War Cult. And this reads closely as Record 084-Bridge-10.7 as the first entry on the card. Kind of funny that Maya Sundaresh could actually be referenced here again. And she's getting a lot more lore time too. Go figure. Again, I digress. These records speak on jumps from different points to roughly the same point in time, or at least a few later records could suggest. We undertake 2 missions in early Destiny where we see the Stranger, one being outside for the first time that we enter the Temple of Crota.
We've woken the hive.
And another being in a later mission called Chamber of Night. She recounts both of these instances within this card, especially starting from record 142-Bridge-08.1 downward to the end of the card, where she chooses to interact with our Guardian. These are events that go in a non-linear order from start to finish. Her first discovery of our Guardian's extraction of the Shard of the Traveler being, as we actually completed the mission. If nothing else, I wanted to set in stone that there is some reason to believe that time travel exists within Destiny, and why not? I mean, everything else is crazy enough to work. But seriously, I think it's safe to assume that it's there. I feel we've established things enough, but for bonus points you can check out Rasputin 4 for further evidence of the Stranger, with a phrase used in each card being, I stand here now and now and now. Have fun with that little rabbit hole. There's far too many points to have within one video for the Stranger, so let's get back to Saint-14 after one more point. Before going too far, I know that there's the Titan mark called the Entanglement mark that outlines a few body parts and components strewn about in several timelines. This also seems to be a relatively recent entry within the Future War Cult's recording system. Let's keep thinking fourth dimensionally, however, as we go along, because the possibility that the Stranger could still have had contact with Saint-14 isn't that outlandish. Oh yes, you know I'm gonna tackle it. You know what's coming.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain. I will. I know.
Will what?
I wasn't talking to you, little light.
It was Saint-14 all along! Okay, no it wasn't. I mean, it could have been, but it's more possible that the Stranger was talking to someone that was around Saint-14 or came in contact with him later on. As it is, this would suggest that the Stranger worked with some Guardians from time to time after her phrase of, I was not forged in light. She's no stranger to it, at least. That was a bad pun. I'm sorry. There is no proof for it, but there's hints. There's these little hints that suggest that Saint knew about us ahead of time. You know, hints. Saint-14's helmet, the Darkness card, Saint's ship, the perfect para. Oh, right, we didn't talk about those yet. Let's talk about the Great Pigeon, the ship of Saint-14. The name? Pigeons are the only birds left in the city sky, one of the many last things we fight for. If you have a problem with that, we could step into the Crucible. Saint-14. Ship's final log. Osiris, I hope whatever you find in this place is worth it. My recommendation to install you as Vanguard Commander was not a gesture to stroke your ego. It was an order to stay and help the city achieve all that it could. An order you refused to follow. News of my demise will no doubt reach you late. I can already see your response, the guilt that will follow, however fleeting. I thought you had changed after Six Fronts, that seeing your people on the brink of destruction and spared from death would be reward enough to stay, to fight. I'll fight in your stead one last time. Father, My duty is at its end. I've seen what the city can become. I know you can lead its people to it. To my inspiration. Your final gift to me I now send back to you. It will be good to see you again. Saint-14. The ship itself bears striking resemblance in a way to a new Future War Cult ship with roughly the same design. It's called Bone Grip, and I find it funny that it has these purple-bluish lines down the nose of it, very similar to that of Saint-14's helmet and his ring. This is a common pattern I see all over. At the least, I could suggest a type of affiliation with the Future War Cult, which, again, wouldn't be too far off given the Exo Stranger. The Stranger also seems to bear these same marks on her forehead, after all. Of course, the Great Pigeon doesn't have these marks, so this could just be a side observation. The design is similar, but we know how much that can actually matter in Destiny's ships. Obvious sarcasm. The ship does have these purple bands that fly off the back of it, wrapped around each wing in different formats. This is very similar to the bands that we see with Saint-14's lifeless form in the dark future. Wow, I got a little off topic there. Okay, the first part of the tab really goes into condescension against Osiris, telling him, hey buddy, you really screwed up this time, but I guess I'll cover you till I die for good this time. Thanks for that. It's the second and third parts that are most interesting to me. Father, my duty is at its end. I've seen what this city can become. I know you can lead its people to it. This again leads back to the helm of Saint-14, where it seems he had a vision of the future, or knew what was going to happen with it. This suggests, however, that Saint-14 may not have known the speaker in the future time, or didn't know who was involved so heavily with the early days of the city, which leads down more rabbit holes about lost records and a second Dark Age, etc. But this bit about an inspiration. To my inspiration. Your final gift to me I now send back to you. It will be good to see you again. Let's go to the perfect paradox and you might get where I'm going with this. A tale that's different from the rest, the thread unfurls against the clocks. The one the speaker loved the best must have a perfect paradox. I never found Osiris, but I've killed enough Vex to end a war, and they, in turn, struck a fatal blow. They completed a mind with the sole function to drain the light from me. It worked very well. Don't worry, not that you worry much. It took them centuries to build, keyed to the unique frequency of my light, and I sit atop its shattered husk. I mourn that I will never reach the heights you have. To me, you represent everything a Guardian can become. Yours is a thriving city, so different from mine. My whole 14th life I fought to make my city yours. I never finished. All I have left is this weapon. The Cryptarchs say you crafted it yourself, built it out of scraps and light and sheer will, inside the Infinite Forge. I'll make sure it finds its way back to you. When you gave it to me, I swore I would make it my duty to follow your example. I'm still trying. Saint-14. The first part of the tab is a prophecy by Osiris, or at least reads very similar to the other verses that we have, 1 to 10, on the Osirian weapons from the Forge. This being the case, Osiris knew that Saint wasn't going to end up in a very good place. In fact, it would lead to his death? Let's define a paradox. A statement or proposition that, despite sound or apparently sound reasoning from acceptable premises, leads to a conclusion that seems senseless, logically unacceptable, or self-contradictory. This means what we are looking for is something that, by all accounts, doesn't make a ton of sense, and Osiris seems to understand that. This inspiration that Saint-14 talks about, who is it? Who is it that has this effect on his overall will in life to make the city as great as this person's city? This tells me there's some kind of knowledge of another time, which you could say is the past, but the city was only blooming at that point, even shortly after the Battle of Six Fronts, being a fairly young period for the city. Saint seems to refer to it in the past tense, being that it's already happened for him. Even then, I think it's pretty obvious, even if it doesn't make sense. That inspiration is us. We're the one that Saint is living to be more like, to push himself to become, to be a better Guardian and become something similar to what we are today.
I've had other teachers. Time. Pain. A guardian who makes a habit of the impossible, who I'm proud to call a friend.
Our guardian is a special one. Our guardian is one that has done all of the things that Cage, Shax, and many others deemed incomprehensible. We ourselves are a paradox, a walking paradox of what a guardian should be able to do. We are given a weapon that we will use to great effect into the future by a Titan that now lies in a dark simulation of a possible future, one that he doesn't want to see come to pass. Saint-14 fights and fights and fights, ending an army full of Vex that could possibly push back and advance. He could be one of the reasons that we don't have to worry about the Vex quite as much in our own timeline, or at least spreading too quickly along the solar system. Eventually, this shotgun will fall back into the hands of a younger Saint-14, and the cycle will repeat itself. If this story can get any more John Connor and Kyle Reese, I would love to see it. Terminator was awesome back in the day, not this new crap. Digressing again, this isn't a movie review. This sounds to be a similar story to that of another weapon, one that links back to our other time traveler, the Stranger. No Time to Explain's Grimoire card tells us just as much, along with the Stranger's rifle. Navarro's timeline analysis indicates the weapon is the fabled Exo Stranger's rifle, enhanced at a future point in its continuity and then sent back to this present. Delia's timeline analysis indicates that the weapon was built by Praedyth, who based it on his own version of the Exo Stranger's rifle and then sent it adrift in a time ripple. Hari's timeline analysis indicates the weapon was built by beings of unidentifiable origin and arrived here by pure accident. Inashis' timeline analysis indicates the weapon originates from Earth, late Golden Age, and will eventually be lost to time ripples once again, where its systems will degrade and be replaced until our recent past acquires it as an Exo Stranger's rifle. As for me, I think it's safe to say the weapon is proving far more fun than we could have hoped. And for a bonus, the Stranger's rifle. Ghost's analysis suggests this weapon has been exposed to incredible forces, and that parts of it shouldn't yet exist. Weapons seem to have a way of falling into our hands. We may yet see the No Time to Explain once again, just as we are given the perfect paradox for the first time for the second time. But as the perfect paradox states, it apparently took centuries for Saint-14 to be cut down by the Vex within the Infinite Forest, and this leads me to believe we're able to possibly find him out there still, able to bump into him within one of the many simulations that exist. As it states, however, Saint never did find Osiris. So perhaps this is just meant to be his overall fate, to keep pushing back the Vex in his own way, similar to Osiris. For now, we'll see what else plays out of this idea of time travel and let the story rest for now until something else comes up later on. I think I've broken my own brain enough with all this talk of time travel at this point, so I can imagine some of you out there might need to check out a few more things and see where else I'm coming from with this. I'll leave the links to the items I referenced in the description below. I realize I haven't been doing that this whole time, and I have a total way that I can do so, and should, to make it easy for you guys to follow along. That said, thanks again to Baxter, Purple Chimera, and the rest for all you do over at Ishtar Collective. I wouldn't, honestly, have enough time to do anything if it wasn't for you guys, especially given this season. My goodness. Really wish I could do some mind forking of my own some days, let me tell you. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this summation of Saint-14 to the future, let me know with the buttons below and the subscribe button for more from me. I thank you guys for sticking with me this whole time, and I'll see you next space time, and in the future. Till next time, Guardians, take care.